So again, I just went over all those different ways that you can actually get it onto your computer. So once you sketch it out on a piece of paper, you use pencil, whatever it is, you sketched it out. Once you did that, you can either take a picture with your phone, email it to yourself and download it, upload it to a Dropbox, or your Google Drive, whatever it is, then download it. I have a Mac and I have an iPhone, so I can airdrop it right to my desktop. I did it that way. And then once I did that, I'm going to open Illustrator up. I opened up a standard 8.5 by 11 landscape. And then I went to File in Illustrator. While I'm in Illustrator, I went to File, Place. So File, Place. Oh, it's if you hit Shift Command P, that's File, Place. Shift P is print. I should know that. So if you want to place an image in here, you hit Shift. You hold down, I should say, you hold down Shift Command and then P. And then a little box will pop up and then you can pick your image, or you can just go to File, Place. And then you can place your image in here. So once your image is in here, what I like to do is I like to open up my layers panel, right? If you don't have this here, you just go to Window and you can choose what panels you want to see. You can also choose your workspace. I have Essentials. Play around with this, honestly, play around with it. Because even if you get it to a place where you don't like it, you can always like reset it to get it back to what it was before. So I have it set to here. And then if there's any panel that I need to bring up, I would just click on one of these and it'll just pop up. So for instance, a line, if I wanted to bring that up, which is already here, if it's already here, already open, it'll just open like this. If it wasn't, let's say a line wasn't there, it'll just pop up like randomly on the side. You can just drag it and add it to whatever area you want it to be in your workspace. I like to do that just to stay organized, so I don't have all these little windows everywhere. But okay, so in your layers panel, you are going to see that I have the image that I just placed in here. That's it. What I like to do, once I have my image in here, because I'm going to trace this. I'm actually going to trace this. I'm going to redraw it in InDesign. Well, there's two ways I can do it. I can either Illustrator has a way of it just draws, like traces it for you, or you can just draw it yourself. And then you can use whatever works best and whatever design you actually really like. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create a new layer, right? I'm going to have a new layer down here, and I'm going to actually lock it because I just want to have just a new layer down here. And then just so that I have another space I can work anyway if I have to. Then I'm going to double click on my image. Once you double click it and name it, I'm going to name it pizza. If it lets me type. Just so I know what it is. So when you're creating your image, so when you're creating and doing your layers, it's really good to name your layers, because if you have like 30 layers in here and they're all just layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, you're not going to know what goes with what. So I always suggest just name them so that you can stay organized. So I'm naming this pizza, so I know, oh, it's the pizza graphic. So so I know what it is. So if I have like 30 layers on here, I'm going to know no matter what, this is the pizza graphic. I'm actually going to duplicate it too. Because I'm going to keep an original just in case I mess up. I'm going to keep it as pizza copy. All right, so I'm going to lock these. And then over top the pizza, I'll create a new layer too. I'm going to name this outline because I'm going to start outlining it while I'm in this layer. I'm going to go over here to the pen tool and I'm going to start tracing it. And when you click the pen tool, it looks like this. It's either you can just click and it'll automatically create a shape and close it, right? Hover over it, you can actually delete it too. If you have the negative tool, not negative tool, if it's a pen tool with a little minus sign, that means you're getting rid of a point. If it's a pen tool with a little plus sign, you're adding a point. If it's a pen tool with this little like arrow looking thing, if you click and hold, it'll actually create more of a angle to your to what you're doing. And again, it's U plus I can add. And then if you see the pen with this little O, that means you're closing your shape. You're closing it or you're ending it. So this is just a line. So, but if this wasn't a line, and if this wasn't a line, it was an actual shape, when I come over here and see that, oh, it'll actually close it up and make it into a shape. So that's that. I'm gonna lock that too. But anyway, go in your pen tool and you can start tracing. You can start tracing if you, once you click wherever you want to start, if you click and then drag, that's when you can make curved lines. And then again, you're just going to start tracing this out. You're basically redrawing it all over again. I like to, if I have a specific angle and it's just not this isn't working, you can click the previous line, it'll get rid of it and kind of make it a regular point. And then when you click somewhere else, it kind of gives you another opportunity to create a curved line. And again, you're just going through and you're tracing. But if you, let's say you just don't want to see, or especially if your design is maybe super detailed, you might not want to, get rid of that. Oh, and that's another way. If you're, when you're in your actually drawing, so for instance, it was filled. I don't want that because now I can't do my design. I like to get rid of it. So this is none, there's no fill in here. And then this back color here, that's actually the line color. So that's your stroke color. It's black right now. It might be easier to have it to be like blue or something, just so that you can distinguish it from maybe your design. So I'll have it blue. And again, I'm just kind of going through and outlining it. But like I said, let's say you didn't want to do all that. And especially if you're kind of like, oh, I don't have enough time, or I really don't feel like sitting here and doing this. I mean, honestly, as you're doing this more and more, you're gonna fly through this. So when you're first starting, you may make a lot more points than I just did. That's fine. You go at your own, run your own race when it comes to this. You'll be able to kind of do this as quickly as possible. Let me just give you an idea of what it looks like. So that outline, the little eyes right here show what's visible. So if I take away any of those, you're not gonna be able to see it anymore. So if I take away this, you can see I started outlining it. So that's the outline. And then again, you can go in, use the pen tool. If you don't want to use the pen tool, like you want to use the shape tool. So this is the shape, it defaults to a rectangle. If you right click on it, it gives you all the other shapes that you can do. I'm going to hit the ellipse or the circle, it's ellipse. And I can also drag to make my circles. While you're still clicked in here, you didn't release from your click. If you hold down the space bar, you can move this to wherever you want. If you hold down shift, it'll make it a perfect circle. So it's up to you. Shift, perfect circle, space, move it around, shift space, it'll make it a perfect circle and you can move it around. So I don't want it to be a perfect circle, but I do want to move it around so that it lines up with my little pepperoni as much as possible. And once you release right from it, you can edit how big it is right in here. You could also, let's say you don't want to be in the shape tool anymore. Click your little black arrow selection tool. The white arrow allows you to pick each of these points so that you can really manipulate what you're doing. The black arrow just lets you pick the overall shape and kind of just overall size it. So I'm going to actually pick the white arrow. And that way, when you click on each one of these points, right, I can start to really manipulate what this looks like. Sorry, guys, for anything you guys hear in the background. So I click again, I click each of these points. I'm just making this circle. I'm going to change the color of it so that you can see what I'm doing. This is a color palette. You can select any of these colors. If you have the image, or I'm sorry, the shape, the lines that you want to change the color, you have to have them selected. And then once you have them selected, you just pick the color that you want them to be. So let's say that's my pepperoni, right? That's the first part of my pepperoni. Again, here's where you kind of decide where the colors are. This outside on the right, that's the color of the outline, the lines of it, and then the inside would be on the on the left. Again, if your shape is selected and whichever one's in the front right here, whichever color or box is in front, that's the color that you're editing. Right now, I'm editing the fill, so I can change it to whatever I want it to be if I want it to be a certain color, right? And again, you can go through here and change the colors within the color palette, or if you double click on the box, it'll give you the color picker, and that's where you see all the color codes that we just went over. So CMYK is here. This is hex because the little hashtag is there, and then RGB. HSB, I never really used that before, but RGB is where you can start manipulating the RGB color code, CMYK, the CMYK color code, or the hex. And also just when you edit one of these, it'll change all the rest of those. So if I wanted more cyan on this and I said, you know what, I want it to be 40, it's going to change all of these, right? It's going to change this and it's going to change this to match. If you just choose in here as well, if you actually want to pick the color in this area, again, wherever you choose, all of these are going to change. And then let's say you don't want it to be red, you can definitely go through here. It looks a little ombre rainbow. You can kind of go through here and change the color completely. If you want it to be red or pink or purple or blue, you know, whatever you want it to be, you can. And then come down here if it's more like an orangey, kind of ends with red too. I want it to be like a more orangey color because it's like pepperoni that's already been cooked. I don't want it to be too dark though, because I want to add lines to define it a little bit more, and I can do that. And again, wherever I'm choosing, it's going to change all the color codes for you. This is really helpful because if you need to record the color code somehow, especially if you're creating the brand. So if you're creating the brand colors for an organization and they say, oh, we're going to use a burnt orange, that's going to be one of our brand colors. You need to jot down the color code and save that somewhere so that if you're recreating something, it's the same burnt orange red that you want to use. So you could jot down the CMYK code, the hex code, or the RGB code, or all three. I like to have all three on hand. And then once you have it, you can press OK, and then it'll fill it. If you want to save this too, so you can also go down to your swatches. If you hover over these, it'll tell you what each of them are. If you go to your swatches layer, here's all the like default colors that you have. Let's say if you created a color you really like, you could actually drag and drop what you want right here. Oops, it didn't work. Hold on, let me do it again. There you go. Why is it not working? The drag and drop from here too. The little plus sign will pop up, and then you can, oh, I did. It went right there. So there you go. You can kind of save that color. It'll give you the CMYK. This is giving me the CMYK because I have it all in CMYK right now. But if that's that little brown that you want to use, then you can reuse it. Every time you create one of these circles, you can go ahead and reuse that same brown so that it's all the same. And I don't want it to be red anymore. So there you go. That's how you do that. And then let's say this is taking way too long. Let me show you the other way, because basically you're going to use the pen tool and you're going to kind of go through and like I said, you're going to redraw all of this yourself using the pen tool. You can also use the line tool if you have straight lines. The shape tool if you want to actually create a specific shape and then manipulate it after you've created it. Again, the black selection tool you just use to select the whole entire shape, and then you can resize the whole one. If you use the white selection tool, you can actually select each point that you created and manipulate that specific point in the overall shape. So I definitely encourage everyone to play around so that you can get it right to where you want it to be. Now, after you've done that, you're like, it's taking too long, and you just want to see if you can do it yourself. I'm going to, going to take one of these. This is the one that I didn't do anything to. I'm going to take that. I'm going to select the whole thing. So let's say again, I don't feel like sitting here and outlining every little thing. Let me see if Illustrator can just do it for me. You can do that. So what you're going to do is you're going to select your image that you want to select. You can do two things. You can actually edit this. If you click edit in Photoshop, it'll open it in Photoshop for you. If you don't want to do all that, you can just hit image trace. Sorry. It's going to change your image. Oh, sorry, guys. My image is really big, so it's going to take a while. There you go. It's starting. Depending on how big your image is, it'll take maybe like 2 seconds, or it can take a couple minutes. So that just depends on. This is a large image because I took it on my phone and then I uploaded it on here. If it was a smaller image, if I like had it in Photoshop and I saved it as like a smaller resolution, it would take a lot. It wouldn't take so long to trace it. And again, I'm going to encourage you, definitely do research if you like. There are so many designers who have found way easier ways or have a lot more tricks and tips just from them doing this so much, sorry, that you might be able to find different ways to do this as well. These are 2 ways that I would do it. But there's so many different ways. That's the great thing about these design programs that we use. There's no one way to do something. There's always like 3 or 4 ways to do something, and designers will either find that or they'll find an easier way. Like I said, designers are really awesome in that way where they can find all these different ways to do things. Now, I just traced this. So you can do one of 2 things. You can either change it. So I have it as the high fidelity photo. You can change it. You can play around with it as black and white. You change it to black and white trace. It'll do it like that. I kind of like that a little bit. You can also edit how you like what actually the threshold and everything. So the threshold, I can say, no, I want more, I want less. It traced a little too much for me, especially if your paper, like the paper that I sketch this on is slightly textured. So I might want to say, no, I don't want it to pick up all the textured in the background, or maybe I do because I want to include that. You can mess around with the threshold. You can also change the mode in here. So the image trace panel pops up when you click this little box here at the top. But again, whatever you do, it's going to take forever. It's going to have to load it all up. So yeah. And then you can kind of mess with the threshold. If I say, black and white, that mode is that's not it. You can always click this little drop down and say, oh no, color, grayscale. That'll trace it, especially if this is already color. It's not, so I'm not going to do that. You can change the preset. I originally had it black and white, but because I edited the threshold, it automatically changed to custom. But if there's any of these other ones that you want to try out, definitely try them out. The 3 color, 6 color, 16 color, high fidelity, low fidelity. That's if you have a lot of color. Like my sketch is black and white, basically, because I just used a pencil on a piece of paper. But if this was like a photo that you actually like found that you took with your camera, like of a group of people, or setting, whatever, or you found online, you might want to trace more than just a black and white. You actually wanted to trace some of the colors and make that into shapes, right? Then you can kind of go through high fidelity, low fidelity, 3 color, 6 color, 16 color, shades of gray if you just want it to be in shades of gray, black and white if you just want it to be in black and white, sketched art, or silhouettes. It kind of just silhouettes your overall design out. It's a big box. Sorry. So it'll do that for you. And again, you kind of edit the threshold to say how much of it that you wanted to actually capture. Change it to silhouettes so you can just see There you go. That's what it would be if it was silhouette, line art. So again, you could play around with this to kind of choose the one that fits kind of either what you're doing, your aesthetic, right? You know, just kind of what you're going for. I'm gonna probably go back to black and white logo because I like that one the best. Yeah, black and white logo. I like that one the best. So I'm just gonna use that. And then I might mess with the threshold a little bit just to get it to where I want it to be. I think I'm gonna just bring it up a little bit because I really want those dark lines to come in so that when I trace it, I'm really tracing it as accurate as possible. And then if you go down to advanced, you can definitely start messing around with all the different settings it has. So paths, right? So if you want to, and again, I say, really play around with this because you never know what you want it to kind of look like. Noise. Let's see what that looks like. That cleans it up a little bit. If it was less, there would be more. That way. Yeah, definitely like it that way. You can ignore white. So ignore white gets rid of all the white space, not the white, the actual white. So for instance, it'll literally just knock out and just include the lines that are being drawn, which I want so that I can fill them with whatever color I want them to fill. So there you go. You went through all of these, you mess with all the different settings and you love it. I might want to create strokes. I think that's what I want to do too. Again, I do this a lot, but at the same time, there's so many different settings to do that. Oh, I don't want to do that. So many different settings. So I like to mess around with everything just to really get it to where I want it to be. All right, I'm done. That's it. Perfect. You're going to have it selected and then you're actually going to hit expand. Once you hit expand, now you have all the lines that you can use. All right. Now going over to my layers panel, you can now see too is that once I expand it, this is here in my pizza copy. Once I've expanded it, here are all the paths it created. All the paths. It's all grouped together. If you want to ungroup it, you can. If you want to work within the group, you just click all these different areas and it'll just select all these different things. But because I said ignore white, if I were to move this, right? If I move this over here, there's no white. There's no white space. I got rid of all the white space. So I really just have an outline of my pizza. Now, what I like to do as well is I like to ungroup it so I can bulk delete areas that I don't want. Move back to the page. All right, so what I like to do is I like to ungroup. So you can either hit Command Shift G, that ungroups it, or you can go to Object and ungroup. So it has to be selected and then it'll come up as white and then you hit ungroup and it'll ungroup it. Once it's ungrouped, now I can actually select everything individually. I like to do this really quickly just to clean up all of the stuff that maybe I don't want so that I can kind of select things in bulk to start deleting. I don't want a lot of these little speckles everywhere. So I'm just going to delete those really quickly. When I am like editing one of these things by itself, or I'm just editing this, like there's no other graphics I might have in here that I haven't included yet, I'll have it ungrouped. But if I let's say I had my pizza graphic, right? Let's say I had like a plate graphic in here, I have the pizza graphic grouped as one and the plate graphic grouped as another, just to, again, keep everything organized. And that way it'd be easier for me to select. But for instance, like I really kind of want this little like heart box. I kind of want that selected by itself. So I'm going to do that. So I kind of got rid of as many of it as many of these little dots as possible. Because if you want to keep them, you can. This is just me. I just want to have a clean page as much as possible. But let's say something didn't come through right. You can either select it, right? Because it's not grouping anymore, so you can select. Or if you hit the white arrow tool, you can select it and actually start manipulating the lines and the dots inside. So definitely this little magnifying glass, you can zoom in as much as you want. You just drag and drop. You just drag. So if you drag down, it zooms in. If you drag up, it zooms out. So there you go. That's how you do that. And then once you start again, you can kind of start. If you're, especially if you're zoomed in, you're like, oh, I don't really like the way this is. You can start manipulating all the different points by itself to kind of get it to the thickness that you want it. You can use this to select a bigger area, right, of points, and you can delete them. Right? I don't want that there. I don't like that weird line. So you kind of go through and kind of really manipulate how you want this to look. Again, if you don't want to do all that, because this can also create a lot more work for you because you got to clean it up a little bit better. And you can use the eraser tool to definitely get rid of those edges that maybe you don't like. That's another thing that you can do as well, right? You can do that too, just to clean it up and kind of get it to where you wanted it to be. So that's an option too. But if you decide, you know what, this way isn't for me and you want it to go the other way, you can also just do the outlines like we talked about before.